It is 7 o'clock. Is there anyone, Paul Simpson, or who can sub, or Philip Owen? Do you know of anyone who can sub for Councillor Roberts-Thompson?
It's Paul. No, I don't think so. We've not got anybody else on, and I am expecting Trish to be on.
Can we hang on a minute or two to see whether she signs? I'm not saying hold the meeting. To see if she signs in. Failing that,
I'll give it a couple of minutes.
I can call Jill up from downstairs and she can stand in.
Yeah, I'm happy to give it a couple of minutes. Is that okay, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure. I'm just calling Councillor Roberts-Thompson in, so maybe that'll assist her in joining the meeting.
Okay.
And I think she may be with us now, actually.
Yes, I am, Jeremy.
There we are. Thank you very much, Councillor. Back to you then, Chair. Thank you.
If you can confirm that the meeting's being recorded, then I'll commence.
That's confirmed, Chair.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. This is the Broxtowe Council Finance and Resources Committee on the 8th of October. My name's Greg Marshall and I'm chair of this committee. Joining us tonight are a selection of officers of the authority and councillors who make up the committee. And with that, could I just hand over to Jeremy Ward to clarify any apologies and then just give a rundown of the attendees, please. You've frozen, I think, Jeremy. No.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you very much, Chair. So in attendance tonight are Councillors Barbara and Steve Carr, Councillor Cubley, Councillor Esom, Councillor Eric Kerry, Councillor Pat Lally, Councillor Greg Marshall as Chair, Councillor Philip Owen, Councillor Radulovic, Councillor Roberts-Thompson and Councillor Paul Simpson. We've got apologies this evening from Councillor Elliott and Williamson, and substituting, no, sorry, not Councillor Elliott, we also have in attendance Councillor Bagshaw, and substituting for Councillor Williamson is Councillor Tim Hallam. And also through you, Chair, we haven't been informed of any interests unless anybody would like to declare so now. No, so that's back to you then, Chair, for the minutes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So item 3 is the minutes of the previous meeting, which we're seeking to approve on pages 1 to 6. Can I move those as a true and accurate record, please?
Chairman, before you take the vote on that, on page 3, I'm not challenging the accuracy of the minutes, but on page 3, where it says headed section 106 ITPS allocations, at the last meeting, I did ask for further information on 3 of those bullet points. I've had the information on 2 of them, for which I'm grateful, but the second bullet point, the step change improvement in the public transport offer, particularly Kimberley and Nuttall, I've had no feedback, no information at all on it. So I'm making the point again.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. Can I please ensure recorded somehow in this meeting that we ensure that Councillor Owen receives the information is requested under bullet 2 as well, please, just so that we can be sure that that's completed. Thanks for that, Councillor Owen. And with that, I think the minutes have been moved and seconded by Councillor Carr. Can we take those to the vote then, please, Jeremy?
I didn't get it in time.
Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Carr, Barbara Carr.
Abstain as I was absent.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
4.
Councillor Esom.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Lally. Councillor Lally. I'll come back to Councillor. Oh, there's Councillor Lally. Are you currently muted, Councillor Lally?
Can you hear me? 4.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts-Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you, Jeremy. Item 4 on the agenda is reference back from other committees. There's 3 on the agenda tonight. Essentially, the the principles of those discussions have been taken and moved at the appropriate committees. This is an affordability issue, and as they all carry some significant cost implications, they come back to this committee as reference back. The first one of those then is 4.1 on pages 7 to 20, reference back from the Community Safety Committee, which is public conveniences in Beeston Square. The recommendation from that committee was to finance a changing facility and toilets at Beeston Square, covered by ITPS monies. Zulf, is there anything you'd like to say in addition to that? Sorry, Mr. Dar, is there anything you'd like to say in addition to that reference?
No, Chair, I would not. We have funding set aside for these facilities, and as the scheme develops, we'll bring it back to the appropriate committee if it's approved today. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is a recommendation to this committee as set out. I'll move that.
I'll second.
Thank you. And can you take us to the vote on that, please, Jeremy?
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
4.
Councillor Easom.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. Second reference back is from the Policy and Performance Committee on the 1st of October. This is specifically around leisure facilities strategy. There was a discussion, there was a presentation actually to that meeting around continuum leisure, and then there was a discussion about some further optioneering that as an authority we would like to see, and a commitment given in that meeting that there'd be a cross-party working group set up to discuss some of those options, and I think that was endorsed by the political leaders. Mr. Dar, can I bring you in on that point?
I agree with all that, Chair, that this money is specifically set aside for some expert financial advice on the 2 options at Bramcote. And you're absolutely right. We're also in the process of setting up this task and finish group. And once we have the name of those members, I'll establish that group and we can have that first kick-off meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. That was helpful clarification. And I think I seem to remember there was some broad support of the direction of that strategy and then with that working group as well. So with that, I'll move the recommendation under item 4.2, please.
Second that.
Thank you. And can we have a vote on that, please, Jeremy?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
4.
Councillor Easom.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
We weren't given the opportunity to discuss this matter before we voted, were we? You just went straight to the vote.
Yeah, that's true, Councillor Kerry, on the basis that the principle and the in-depth discussion took place actually on the principle took place at the actual Policy and Performance Committee. This is I guess an affordability and financeability issue in that sense, and the proposal is that it is, in inverted commas, therefore affordable. We're moving to the vote, which is I'm not quite sure I want to open a discussion halfway during the vote being cast, Eric. So if you'd like to vote for or against or abstain, of course, you're entirely entitled to.
Well, OK, I will make a comment. Just that it is about money, but you spend money when you know what you're spending it on. So I thought the working group would come up with the brief for the money being spent in more detail, and then we'd approve it. But I will vote for. I think next time I would maybe not.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
It's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final reference back is item 4.3 on pages 23 to 24. Hot topic at the moment, particularly around devolution bill through Parliament. There was a discussion around this at Policy and Performance Committee, effectively suggesting that there is an earmarked amount of up to £30,000 being established for commissioning of work required in connection of local government review, if it is needed, indeed, and it's effectively a provisional setting aside of that amount in that sense. I'll move that item from the chair.
Second that.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I guess what you're going to say. Can you take us through the vote, please, Jeremy?
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
4.
Councillor Easom.
4.
Councillor Carey.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
And that's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. That's helpful. All those references back then have been carried. Item 5 on the agenda, set out on pages 25 to 32, is the General Fund revenue budget variations. Won't be a surprise to you all. Of course, this is set in the context of the cost pressures we've faced during the coronavirus crisis and other variations to the revenue budget, offset predominantly by the grant income, the grant from central government. I wondered if Mr. Dar, you could take us through this item mainly, and then I'll come to the meeting for questions and observations.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll take the committee through the main highlights of the report. I'll move straight to Appendix 1 and Item 1. And in that particular report, we talk about the business support grants. This has been a really fantastic effort by our team in getting these grants out to our businesses. So we did supply the best part of £17.9 million across a range of different businesses in Broxtowe. So it was a real success story. All the various business support grant schemes have now closed, but we did do a fantastic job with that. We also received some money for new burdens, and that's outlined in the same paragraph. Moving on to Item 2, we did also receive some money around reopening High Street. Again, that's worked really, really well, and we've employed a couple of officers to help with that, as well as a number of practical safety measures. Before I move on to Item 3, as members will know, this is a fast-moving, fluid situation with respect to the pandemic, and there's a similar link to the financial support we're getting from government. So I'm just going to highlight 3 further pieces of support that the council will be receiving over the coming weeks, as these have only arrived after the production of this report. The first one is the self-isolation payment scheme, which relates to a payment of £500 for individuals who are on low income or on benefits who need to self-isolate. We have the main scheme and a discretion element to that scheme as well. And that's being put together with other districts, and Phil Sudlow is here to talk about that scheme at some point during the evening. We also have some further money that was just outlined today around COVID marshals. Again, I'll be sitting down and talking to the general management team about the best way to employ those resources. And thirdly, you may have picked up, members, there is something known as the local restrictions business grant, and that again is really around when businesses have to close due to further time restrictions. And broadly speaking, if the rateable value of a business is over 51,000, it's £1,500 for 3 weeks. If it's under 51,000, it's £1,000 for 3 weeks. Again, this relates to if there is a further tightening in these restrictions, we'd be obliged to apply that particular scheme. So as you can see, a number of different schemes that are evolving as the pandemic moves on. Moving on to Item 3. Liberty Leisure, if you allow me to say a few words on this, Chair, we've, as a council, we've supported the company with paying the 20% top up, and that's totaled £134,000. I've reported to the committee before. The company is in unsurprisingly severe financial distress, given it's been closed. The leisure centres were closed for 4 months, and its footfall is lower than its maximum due to COVID restrictions. In effect, the company is looking to slim down where it can. And as part of that slimming down, I met with the managing director and the chief executive, and we did review a list of potential voluntary redundancies, and that's in line with a proper and due process. The next step will be a case of the finance department reviewing those suggestions, ensuring they meet our policy, which is a payback in 3 years, and then we would expect the chief executive, after agreeing with GMT, to approve those voluntary redundancies. They'll then go to the board on the 20th, the Pleasure Board on the 20th of October, with a view to actioning them. The reason we're taking this action, Chair, is because the next committee is the 10th of December, and if we delay, then we would have to, as a company and the council, ultimately pick up these extra 2 months of costs relating to these individuals. There will be a further more detailed report on Liberty Leisure at the December committee, where we'll outline the scale of the challenge we've got in year and our recovery plan and how we look to meet that challenge in 2021. So I'll take you through that once we get there in December. I'm working very closely with Liberty Leisure on that report. Moving on to item number 4, the pay award. That's self-explanatory. It was 2.75%. We budgeted at 2%, so there's an additional cost to the council. There's a £20,000 cost on the HRA. That's a just general fund number. Item 5, members are aware of the grants we've supplied to the voluntary group, so they'll have seen that before. Item 6 and 7, I think, again, another part of our council that we should be really proud of. We've done a really good job to help rough sleepers. I know we have very few numbers, but also with helping people in B&B. So that's been a really good piece of work by the housing department. Item number 8, we do investigate complaints in different ways, and therefore we do from time to time employ an independent person to help with that. So we're looking to make sure that we do budget for that in the future. And I would wish to continue with that in future, as it does give the additional firepower to meet all the various requirements of the final accounts. A real success story. I'll be pleased to continue that in the future. Item 10, we've talked about that already. Item 11 is, again, good news. This software, believe it or not, will save us two man days, person days per month, so that's really good. The additional software for DWP file. Item number 12 summarises the money we've had today, which is 1.352 million, and that money is to mitigate the income losses and the additional costs to the general fund. I'll talk about the compensation scheme further down the page. Item 13, again, this has been well trailed. Base rates are a historic low, 0.1%. We did budget at 0.75%. Again, that's been way off the mark, and we are suffering in terms of our returns. So in the new year budget, we'll budget at a lower level, but in the year there's a shortfall. Moving on to item 14, along with Liberty Leisure income, the other really big massive impact has been really the commercial rental income. And given we're in a public meeting, I'm not at liberty to explain where we are with the individual tenants, but you've got real pressures in terms of tenants not being able to pay their rent. Now we are following the line from the Secretary of State. We're not pursuing evictions or court orders. We are looking to find a reasonable way of tenants finding ways of deferring their payments, but there will be an impact on our overall commercial rents. Moving on to item 15, again, members will have seen the income compensation scheme. Myself and the head of finance, Paul Adcock, completed our first return, and we looked at our eligibility. And as I said previously, sadly, the income at the leisure centres is not covered. It's a separate company. The income from the commercial rents is not covered, and neither is the loss of interest income. What is covered is car parking, licensing, and 1 or 2 smaller areas and planning. When we did work this through for the first return, we're broadly looking at a compensated region of around £90,000. So we'll do this again in a few months' time to work through the formula and bring in whatever income we can through this scheme. But the point here is that the big ticket items are not covered. We've also got some additional costs on COVID. Again, we did early on during the pandemic. We made sure we protected people with serious health conditions, COPD, and other conditions, and we did cover their roles with the agency, which is now rolled off. But given where we are with the pandemic, this may come back. We also did increase and make some investment in IT to make sure things went smoothly. Number 17, this is a developing piece of work. There's something called the interim development vehicle, which is a precursor to the Midlands Development Engine, and there are some legal costs associated with establishing this body, which includes membership of a number of councils, 3 districts and 2 counties. It's ourselves, Rushcliffe and North Leicestershire, Leicestershire County Council and Nottinghamshire County Council. So we need to make sure we set aside money for the legal agreements to be in place. And then we come to the table, and it shows a net impact of drawn resources of £50,000. In terms of what I said earlier on, we're in a very, very fluid, dynamic situation with our finances. It is challenging to forecast our income, given the potential in the coming weeks for further restrictions. One can see more further difficulties, for example, in car parking or planning or commercial rents. We can see the volatility and difficulty to really get accurate forecasts, but what we will do is we'll model the best we can and report back to future committees. So there's a risk there. There's also risk with our council tax and our business rates income. It's a bigger risk on council tax because business rates is predominantly covered by reliefs. But council tax, broadly speaking, there is a modest reduction. We've now kicked some enforcement. Nonetheless, that'll impact our collection fund. And again, we'll have to look at that closely. We'll go through the budget process. So overall, Chair, there's a lot happening in the on our finances. We're keeping a good close grip on it. We're making sure we maximise whatever money we can from central government. We are working really close with the districts and the county to make sure we're getting the best intelligence and making sure that we can report the best, most accurate information we can to members and get the required approval at the appropriate time as we progress over the coming months. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dar, for the very helpful verbal report and taking us through the excellent detailed report of the substantial material variations to the general fund. That's very helpful. And please pass on my ongoing thanks really to you and the department really for not only, as you say, keeping a tight rein on things, but it's a tight rein on things in the context that we're in. You know, very challenging circumstances. Issues around risk into the future, and I appreciate your candidness really about not hiding away from some of those future risks. Just before I bring Councillor Radulovic in, can I move this item then formally from the chair?
I'll second that.
That's seconded then, and then we can open that to discussion. Councillor Radulovic.
Thank you very much, Chair. What I want to do today, in light of the announced COVID figures today and the potential for a further lockdown, or certainly going on to stage 2 with a government's 3-stage intervention programme. It's been announced today that those measures will probably be brought into this area by next Wednesday. They'll be announced on Monday and brought in on Wednesday. There is great concern, obviously, about the impact that will have on businesses, and I want to stress tonight to anybody watching that we're doing all that we possibly can to try and prevent a further lockdown. We feel that would have a devastating effect and impact on local businesses and local shops and local people, many of whom haven't still recovered really from the lockdown, the 4-month lockdown that we went through from March through to July. So, Chair, in understanding what that likely impact's going to be, and as we've seen today, Nottingham City is now has the highest COVID infection rates across the whole of the country. and that is indeed spreading into the suburbs. The figures for Broxtowe make particularly disturbing reading. I don't want to go into the figures tonight specifically, Chair, but undoubtedly this will have an impact on the council's finances. It will have a huge impact on business rates and rates collection. It will have a huge impact on our commercial activities. And I'd like to assure all members that we will be meeting on frequent and regular basis with members and officers to try and understand what the likely impact will be and whether any government intervention money will come in particular to help those areas that face further restrictions on their ability to trade. Having said all that, Chair, it is a difficult situation that we're in. Not all Nottingham is affected the same. Broxtowe, Rushcliffe, it seems, are disproportionately affected, and that's partly because we fear that the return to students seems to have coincided with a huge increase in COVID infection rates, but the details will be extremely challenging for us, and the financial pressures will be considerable. So I want to assure all members, and I will be contacting Paul Simpson, if you can pass this on to Richard. I will be contacting him, asking for the same level of support that we've had in the past to make any emergency decisions that we have to do in conjunction with the Chief Executive to ensure that the smooth management of the council, and we do intervene and we pay any grant monies out as soon as possible to help those businesses. On a lighter note, though, Chair, it's noticeable we talked about the £500 isolation payment for people returning. I understand that affects 47 people in the whole of Broxtowe, and the cost of administration is actually more than the value of the grants.
Yeah.
I'll stop there, Chairman, but if there's any further questions or comments we can help with, quite prepared to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Radulovic. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I, like the leader, is very concerned about the figures to coming out and the impact that it could have. Just to give you a localised figure, because my ward of Beeston North and Councillor Barbara Carr's ward, Beeston North, was actually, the figures were published for our ward, and there were 43 active cases. Now, if you take that on to the stage up, that the comparison is made per 100,000, that is a figure of around 950 cases per 100,000 in Beeston North. Now, my huge concern, not just a health perspective, although that's the most important thing, is the effect of a 10-day delay in implementing what is necessary, and that is further restrictions that is now happening. And in my mind, that is going to potentially increase the chances of total lockdown in the forthcoming weeks, and that would be a disaster for this borough, for personal households, businesses, and the council as well. And we need to try and avoid that. So I would appeal to the opposition to have influence on their MPs, Lee Anderson and our Darren Henry, in actually getting them to give as much gusto as Ben Bradley is at trying to stop the extra necessary restrictions in Mansfield, because we need them here in Broxtowe and we need them quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. It is important, as Mr. Dar says, to draw out the links between potential COVID escalation and the impacts to the authority, and that's why we're just having those summary discussions here at Finance. I can't
Chairman.
see. Yes, Councillor Owen. I couldn't see you there on the chat, but of course, come in.
I do feel that some responses need, particularly to the comments of Councillor Carr in respect of Ben Bradley. When I heard Ben Bradley on the news, he wasn't saying no to the new proposals, potential proposals, because they've not been implemented yet. He was saying he wanted to be convinced and to be clear that they were absolutely necessary. And in all of this, the government is damned if it does and damned if it doesn't. There have been huge criticisms for it not acting quickly enough. There's been criticisms for it acting too quickly. It is an extremely difficult situation. And I have always said that, and I made the point, I think, of policy, or certainly at a recent committee, I am more than happy to support what is being done. I'm sure the opposition as a whole will do that. I'm sure the government are caught between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to have to shut down businesses, but on the other hand, they don't want to put lives at risk. And I certainly wouldn't want to be in the position of having to make those decisions. But you know, in reality, Chairman, it comes back to all of us. It comes back to everybody in Broxtowe to do as they should do. The way to stop this wretched disease spreading is to follow the instructions and not to think that we are immune or it doesn't matter or it won't happen to us, no matter who we are. And if an appeal needs to go out, a unified appeal needs to go out, then I'm to do that. I'm more than happy to do that. And I'm more than happy to report those organisations that are not obeying the rules and regulations. And almost daily this week, I have had information passed on to me, which I have passed on to the Environmental Health Department, I've passed on to the police, and I've passed on to the Director of Public Health. That's a sort of support that we as the opposition are giving. So I really don't expect snide comments to be made against anybody in the opposition, whether they are councillors in this authority or MPs in the county. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. That is a reflection of the discussions that we had across the political spectrum of the policy committee as well, and thank you for that support. But I don't think Councillor Carr was making a snide comment there. I think it's just hoping that you may have an open door to some of the of our local MPs through your party politics that we may not have. So, but I accept your statements in this committee, Councillor Owen, thank you, and previous policy committees. That's most welcome. I'll just bring Councillor Radulovic back in on that point, or on those points, and then I'll look to move to the vote on the resolution.
Chair, just to say that there is something that we can all do, and that's to share the information that's going out from our comms team. Sarah, Tidy and company are doing a fabulous job of trying to ensure that the public is kept up to date and informed on a daily basis. Can I make a plea tonight to all members of the council to share that information on your social media feeds to try and reach as many people as possible to make sure that Broxtowe, we can try to avoid a second lockdown, and if further restrictions are placed on us, that is not an actual total lockdown, which would have devastating implications for us. But simply all members tonight can make a pledge to put it onto their social media stream, the messages that's coming out from Broxtowe, to try to get to as many people as possible. The guidelines are there to protect us all.
Thank you, Councillor Radulovic. That's good advice. Jeremy, I was going to move to the vote, but Shane, Councillor Eason's just popped up. Can I just bring him in briefly, if you could, Shane? Thank you.
Yeah, just a really quick one. I think I agree with what's been said from everybody. I think what might be useful is if we could spend a little bit of this money that we're getting and perhaps send a written communication to all of our residents with the issue being so serious, because social media is great, I'm sure, but I ain't a big advocate of it. A lot of people aren't. And I think with it being so serious, and it is serious now, we do manage to get, you know, in touches out and the Broxtowe matters out and things like that. And I think this is life-changing and life-threatening. And perhaps to send out some of the information that Millen knows and we know, some of the real figures. So because people, I think, I presume people are getting tired of seeing the news and tired of COVID, because a lot of people, like we've all said here, I drive by schools and see masses of parents without masks on. You know, over the bank holiday weekend, I saw in our local area pubs with bouncy castles. So we are losing, people are losing the will with this. So perhaps a letter that we could send out to them, just reinforcing reality in Broxtowe. So it's actually talking to them. And if necessary, even make it down to the ward areas. I'm sure it's not beyond us technologically to make it for Eastwood, to make it for Kimberley. Apparently there's an area over in the south of Broxtowe that people mention, and over in that area as well. But I think this is a real serious issue, and I think anything we can do would be great. So I just put that out there. If we could do that, that would be great. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Eaton. Specifically on that point, Millen, around written correspondence.
Yeah, we've letters have gone out to all residents in those hotspot areas, and they've been identified as Eastwood and Beeston North in particular. But communications being sent out to all those areas that have high rated, higher than the trigger points. So it looks like in the next few weeks all properties will again be written to. But at the moment it was just done to target those particular areas where there were perceived hotspots. That's been Beeston North and Eastwood in particular, but also Kimberley and whatnot. But communication will be going out to all residents again, ask them to observe the rules, what those rules are, in as simpler form as we possibly can, and setting out the reasons why we need to beat the infection rates.
We are all, I think, iterating each other's messages and showing our support for following guidelines. I'm going to bring Steve Carr back in finally, and then I am going to move to the vote on this.
Just really to apologise if council thinks I was being snide. I'm not a snide person. It probably exhibits the frustrations that that the leader and myself have this week, that we came to a decision, every single district and borough and the county together came to a decision where we supported the introduction of these the new levels of trying to contain the COVID outbreak. That was last Tuesday, and here we are. It's just really out of frustration, and we do need to work together on this in a unified fashion. But it just goes to show as well that you have to be really, really careful what you say and what message that sends out to people.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. The recommendation to resolve and approve the variations and amendments to the general fund then have been moved and seconded. Jeremy, can we move to the vote, please, on that?
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
Abstain.
Councillor Easom.
Yeah, abstain.
Councillor Kerry.
Abstain.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
Abstain.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Simpson.
Abstain.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
And that's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Item 6 on the agenda is the capital programme update. Again, with expenditures by departmental head on the first few pages, and then variations, any variations to that capital programme. I'll move those from the chair.
I'll second that.
That allows us to have a discussion around it. Is it Mr. Dar or Mr. Adcock who's going to be taking us through this?
I can say a few words, and we've got the head of finance, Paul Adcock, in reserve if I struggle, Chair. This is our regular update on the capital programme, and it summarises where we are with our spend at the end of August. There has been an impact on the delivery of the capital programme due to COVID. Clearly, certainly in the housing department, and that comes out in the numbers. We're below where we would normally be, and that is down clearly to the difficulties with working during the pandemic. The other thing I'd want to bring out to the committee's attention is are the changes suggested by the report in Appendix 3. We have had the opportunity to replace the boilers at Bramcote Leisure Centre. We have got some budget left over from replacing the CHB, so we were really keen on getting on with that, with the leading time and winter ahead of us. So we have cracked on with that, and that summarises that particular piece of work. We've also moved on with the new build housing work, and we're suggesting there we carry forward some money from previous years for surveying and technical work, and there's a list of there the schemes we're working on under item 2. Another important change has been our bid to the LEP around converting Durban House into office space for small and medium-sized businesses. Again, you know, we were written to by the LEP and asked for bids. We think this is an important, exciting bid if it is successful. Hopefully, we're looking to get 50% match funding, and then we would then come back to the committee and then proceed with this scheme. We've also got a reference there in item 4 to the £20,000 relating to Walker Street, which we've now done a lot of research around, but we feel it's been covered off through something called the Building Capacity Fund. So therefore, we're taking it out of this particular budget. That's all I want to say. There's some detailed information on the expenditure today, but I need to reinforce there's been a really massive impact on the various departments due to COVID. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dar, and obviously we touched on this at the previous finance meeting as well, and not wholly unexpected. I'm looking in the chat and I can't see anyone who would like to speak, but is there anybody who would like to come in now and ask any questions under this item? Councillor Owen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Can I pick up on pages 42 and 43, one that I have been picking up for the past 2 to 3 years, item 4, the £20,000 for a feasibility study around transport feasibility study on Walker Street. I remember, a year, possibly even 18 months ago, when I raised this, the chief executive said that the county council were in effect dragging their heels on this and couldn't get anything done with them, and could I intervene and try and unblock the logjam, which I did. And my understanding was that the feasibility study had been carried out. The county council have agreed, as the planning authority in this case, to an access to the old Walker Street school site, off Walker Street or Lincroft, I can't remember which now. Therefore, has this study been carried out? And in which case, if it's been carried out, the money must have been used on that. It now seems to have just disappeared into the ether by an accounting sleight of hand.
I can confirm to Councillor I don't have those powers. I can't make things disappear. This relates to this particular scheme. I'm informed that it's actually been funded from a different pot, and I'll research further and give Council a written answer. I'll check in with colleagues, but the latest information I've got, it's funded from a different pot, but the work was complete.
Councillor Kerry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a strange question, and maybe I've missed something, but there isn't any reporting concerning the housing revenue account year-end numbers. Is that going to be somewhere else, or?
So this is the if you move to further up the page, I'll give
page 39.
Yeah, if you go to
39.
Yeah, there's the list of the HRA schemes there. Page 35 has got all the schemes for the HRA into the budget and expenditure, and there's also in the main body of the report the financing of HRA expenditure. If you go to
got it. Thank you.
Got it. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Owen, Mr. Dar said they'll get you a written response specifically on that Walker Street point. I'm looking at the chat, can't see any additional people wishing to speak. So in that sense, excuse me, the item has been moved and seconded. Can we all please note the most latest information and current position and vote on the capital budget variations, please, as set out in Appendix 3. Jeremy, if you could take us through that vote, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
Abstain.
Councillor Easom.
Abstain.
Councillor Kerry.
Abstain.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
Abstain.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Simpson.
Abstain.
Councillor Begshaw.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. Item 7 on the agenda is set out on pages 45 to 56 is the medium-term financial strategy for 2021 to 24-25, and then the associated business strategy that sits alongside that. The recommendation is set out at the page bottom of page 45. Can I move that, please?
I'll second that.
That allows us to open the discussion. Mr. Dar, is it you again?
Yeah, I'm afraid so,
Thank
Chair.
That's good news.
I think commitment probably absolutely sick of my dulcet tones, so I can apologise for that. But this is a really important report for members to consider. It sets our medium-term financial strategy, and it also sets out how we're going to meet the difficult challenges we've got with the financial gap through the business strategy. So moving through the report, we'll move to Appendix 1 for the detail. I have in some detail shared with members all the work we've done on the impact of COVID-19. The financial impact talks about the impact on the workforce, on our services, our supply chain. So it's there for members to consider. I have in those bullet points included a net impact of COVID of £269,000. I need to reinforce what I'm going to say many times over the coming months. There's lots of uncertainty around the financial forecasts, certainly our revenue income stream. So it is a very tentative best estimate 6 weeks ago, and I said things are moving very quickly with COVID and the impact on our finances. So that's an estimate based on what I knew 6 weeks ago, and things are evolving. They talked about cash flow and risk to the council and our recovery plan. Moving on to the spending review, again, members will be aware the Chancellor did initially set out on a spending review. Unsurprisingly, again, that's been postponed. The autumn budget has been postponed, and it looks like a one-year announcement we'll get around Christmas time due to the economic uncertainty. It's very unlikely we'll get a 3 or 4 year comprehensive spending review. Similarly, around the business rate retention scheme and moving to 75% business rate retention, the whole thing around funding, that is, well, bluntly, it's on ice, and it'll be a roll forward in terms of the funding next year. That's the best view we've got, and certainly that's the view of the county treasurer when we met this morning. New homes bonus, that has now, as it were, ceased, and we're expecting no money in 21-22 around that scheme. The tax base, again, we've assumed 1% next year, but we'll look at that again as we progress through the through the budget process. I move on to talk about the HRA. As members will know, we're allowed to increase our rents by CPI plus 1%, and again we do that through refreshing our model. We look at maintaining sufficient balances for investment, and we'll do that through our usual budget process. We know the borrowing cap's removed, again, to give us opportunity to build more houses, but right now we've got really healthy capital receipts to help us with that, and we've had separate reports to Housing Committee on the Housing Delivery Plan, which is progressing well. And there's some comment there around right to buys in terms of the numbers. The capital programme, in terms of the overall big picture, receipts, we have got limited receipts in terms of external sources. We have the receipt we're outstanding with the The tram compensation, and again, members won't be surprised that there is a risk with that. Again, at this morning's finance director's call, the assistant director at Nottingham City Council was quite clear about the really serious financial situation they're in, and therefore there must be some risk linked to our tram compensation, given the serious financial problems that they're under. The other big receipt is around the sale of residential site at Beeston Phase 2, and again that is earmarked to fund the new cinema development. Well, we were successful as part of the cinema development to secure £750,000 towards the development, which was great news. And there's separate reports at policy on the cinema, so I won't repeat that. And then we go on to talk about Appendix 2 really is where we refresh our assumptions, refresh our model, and have a think about where things are going in the coming years. As I've said right at the beginning, maybe too many times today, we're in really uncharted territory in terms of modelling, but we need to do the best we can. Like I said, tech intelligence from the districts and government, and that's what we do, and we refresh the numbers. And unsurprisingly, I've based this on a 2% council tax rise. I've put in pay and price inflation. I've put in a model there for some other assumptions. I've built in there some potential costs we will need to make around the interim delivery vehicle, whole range of assumptions. Happy to talk about those during the questions, and then built in some views on where we'll be with business rates and council tax, and then we have a net figure, and we do have a shortfall, and we do have the balances running down unsurprisingly over the next 2 or 3 years, and we've always looked to use the business strategy to find ways of meeting the gap in the budget. So there you see gaps there year on year, resources versus income, and then we move on to talk about how we're going to meet that gap. So the next part of the report talks about our business strategy. At the beginning there's some background to it, and then we move on to the meat of it, which are the ideas we're going to work on collectively as a management team, the senior management team, to help balance the budget. The first item there on Appendix 3 is again subject to ongoing commercial negotiations. We are looking to sell some land which is owned by the crematorium. As that develops, there'll be regular reports through to committee. Part of the receipt will go towards funding investment in the cremators, but the balance we will find a way, or we will share the proceeds with Aerowash. So that particular scheme is working its way through planning. We're looking at leveraging our investment in the council offices. It'd be really great to have a partner to share office space and accrue some income. The big item there, the third one we're looking at, which clearly we can't get away with, is looking at our biggest expenditure, which is our headcount, our staffing, and we're continually looking at our workforce and what we can do to be more efficient, leverage technology, and look at how we can consolidate services and look at our senior management and structures across the piece, and do that all the time. So we've set aside a target there of £170,000. We've got a proposal there to look at our community buildings. It's modest level of spends, but nonetheless it's something we need to look at, as well as a review of grants. CCTV again, what can we do around rationalising that? Procurement, that's predominantly capital, but nonetheless it's worth commenting on. Our new procurement officer has been very successful. On Beeston Phase 2, this is a financing saving, and rather than technicals, essentially, if your construction moves into a following financial year, if completion goes forward a year, you do save money through financing costs. We always review every year who sits where into the HRA and General Fund, and we do that every year as part of the budget. We do expect, again, in terms of the council tax, the same sort of limits, which is 2% or £5 for each district, with a referendum above that, and I won't be surprised if the same again this year. So again, if you, an extra 1% gives you £60,000, but the model we've built the model on is 2%. Car parking, again, members need to think about in the current economic and the current financial context, again looking again at car parking fees. Planning, I'm pleased to report, and this is one of the things which has been really good, the next two things. Planning is actually holding up in terms of the overall numbers, in terms of revenue. That's good news. So hopefully we can look at that again for next year. And similarly, another real success story has been garden waste income, where we are beating our numbers, and that's great news. You know, it's going really, really well. At some point it will saturate once you maximise the number of gardens, but that's going really well. Again, we'll look again at the CREM in terms of its income and its dividend, and we'll look at new potential opportunities at the crematoria. There's a number of other ones that go down the page which need a lot more work around the lifeline, looking at homelessness, volunteers, grants to voluntary organisations, and our business support unit. So what you've got there is a long list with some ideas more mature than others. Clearly, there will be some challenging decisions for members to think about as we go through the budget process. So I'm sure we'll come back to a lot of these matters during the budget, but this gives a flavour for a map of where we're going to manage what is a challenging financial landscape. Thank you.
Thank you again for the comprehensive report, Mr. Dar. The good news, if there is any, I guess, is that this is like a no surprises report. It is, as you inferred, it's an iterative process, and the trend and the numbers that you're seeing as a committee before you have been shared before. So in that sense, it is no surprise. And of course, as you inferred, you've taken a cautious approach to future future modelling, and none of the business strategy elements are of course realised or built into budgets, as I would expect, and as one would expect in that sense when we're looking at balances into the future. I've moved and seconded that recommendation. That's been seconded. I can see Trish Roberts-Thompson wishing to speak, so I'll bring her in. Trish.
Chair, I just have one comment to make, particularly on the proposal that Zulf mentioned about car parking income. And I accept that this is difficult, but I accept that we also had a very long conversation about it in our meeting in February. But my concern is to use the free hour, to give up the free hour parking. Firstly, that was one of the, and remains one of the really good things about Beeston and about our local government, that we're really supporting our local high street. Now, the issue for me really in particular is that because we've had months of COVID now, most of us, and myself included, and I use those car parks all the time, I don't use them as much as I used to, because actually I, like a lot of other people, shop much more locally. So if the council puts a charge on that first hour, I think what you will do is not increase your money, you will actually decrease the footfall in the high street, which is totally contrary to what you really want, and to your, putting in your COVID, your market specialists and all that that actually we're very much on the cusp. But are these changes permanent? Are my shopping changes permanent, or will I go back to the old? Now, if you put car parking charges on the car parks in Beeston, then I think you will force me and loads of other people like me to actually change their shopping habits. And that will be to the detriment of the car parks and to the detriment of the high street. So I would just ask you to really seriously think about that. I think there are a lot of knock-on effects if you start taking away those really good things where you think, thank heavens for the council, when you go into a council-owned car park. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts-Thompson. Of course, to be absolutely clear, this is a business strategy and options. You'll recall it can only be a handful of months that as committee and as an authority we've had a very detailed discussion around car parking charging, and had actually retained that free hour. I accept the point you're making, and I am sure if there are any proposals as Mr. Dar sets out in the challenging times that we're facing, they'll come back and be aired fully again in that way. But I accept the point you're making. Councillor Philip Owen. Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The report makes very, very grim reading. In fact, in its simple form, on page 51, when we get to 2023-24, if not a bit before, the council will be bankrupt. It's financially not viable on those figures that you present there. So I'm staggered by this. Now, I know there's the argument that there have been increased COVID costs over and above what the government have provided by way of grants. There may be some more still to come. You've spoken today about additional monies coming in. There may still be more to come, but I don't think on the scale that are indicated in the figures that we have here. And it's a salutary fact that your general fund opening balance for 2020-21 financial year was almost 5.5 million. 5.5 million in general fund balances, and within 3 years, the council, if it takes no action, will in effect be bankrupt. Now, I know you set out on subsequent pages in Appendix 2 certain things that you can do to try and deal with that onsetting bankruptcy. And I just want to go through a number of these and comment or seek further information. If we look on page 53, we've got staffing efficiencies there. And the financial impact, we are told, is circa £170,000 in savings. Now, the question I would ask, does that include the additional costs that were approved by the Personnel Committee at its last meeting for a new service director, which would cost, I think, about 70,000, and the market, the new market manager, or whatever the grandiose title was, of £28,000? Because rather than saving money, it looks as though we are spending it. And it really does demonstrate the absurdity, the absolute absurdity of the current model, whereby personnel approves the appointment of new expensive staff without any reference whatsoever to the Finance Committee. Now, if I can move on a little bit further, the Eastern Phase 2 development, delayed construction will result in lower financing costs, that's fine, and we're getting circa £110,000 in lower financing costs, and I can see the argument there. Could I ask, is that net of any income that may be lost? Because if the development were on schedule, we would be getting a greater amount of income, I believe, because the development would be finished earlier, unless I've misunderstood. And I can see Mr. Dar is frowning as though I've not understood it, but I'm sure he'll only be too happy to put me right on that. And then the very bottom one there, council tax increase above the referendum limit, e.g. for climate change. Now, I don't know whether the government have indicated that they are going to change the limit above which we can put up the council tax before a referendum is triggered. But my understanding is at the moment that it is still 2% and is not likely to change. It may, I don't know, but I don't think we should even be considering that, because I cannot see in these straitened times that people are going to be voting in a referendum for any increase above 2%. I really can't. So I'm not clear why that has been put in, because I don't think it's realizable. You'll have your time in a moment. I'll just say my whole lot and then you can come back at me. I have to endorse, and I may be repeating, but I have to endorse the comments made by Councillor Roberts-Thompson as far as car parking charges are concerned. I know this is only a strategy for consideration, but we need to challenge that now. Otherwise, it is worked in and becomes part and parcel of the budget. It would be sheer madness to implement a 50p charge and abolish the free hour. I cannot understand the logic of even putting that in. As I hark back to the Personnel Committee, the argument for appointing a market manager was to increase footfall and increase the revenue for businesses in our high streets. That is an argument. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. But the one thing that will cut the footfall, as Councillor Roberts-Thompson has said, is to put a car parking charge on. We've known that. We know that all along. And so I cannot see the logic in doing that. And then finally, you'll be pleased to know, I go to the bottom of that page and we've got total revenue savings and income. We've got there, it excludes potential income from the sale of crematorium land and any council tax rises above 2%. Well, I've dealt with the council tax rises. Again, I think it would be foolish to include in that savings any revenue, any money that's raised from the sale of land at the crematorium, because that would be a capital receipt and it could only be used once. It cannot be used and should not be used to sustain the revenue budget long term. So I would hope that that wouldn't be put in. And I will just make one final point on the crematorium. I think you've put very nicely potentially additional income during the COVID pandemic. What you mean there, I think, is that more people are going to die and therefore more people will need to be cremated. But I would say that may well be the case, but that's front loading your income, because you can only die once and people that are dying early are not going to die later. So it's not so good for your budget later on. Thank you, Chairman, for that.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Owen. I think the last couple of points, particularly around car parking and council tax, you have my assurance of Chair that these are legitimate discussion strategy issues, business strategy options. They are not decisions and they are not worked into budget, and there are committee structures to discuss these at length like we had a handful of months ago. And this isn't an approach to reopen that. This is what I would expect from a competent authority, continually leaving options and ideas on the table to address challenging times. And I give that assurance from the Chair, Councillor Owen, because I wouldn't expect those kind of significant impacts, whether it be additional council tax over and above the current referendum level, or indeed car parking charges, to sneak in the back door. So you have my assurance from the Chair that these are legitimate strategic options, but of course full debate will be given if and when they come back before this authority. Specifically though, Mr. Dye, if you could come back on staff savings, the financing of Beeston Square net of income as well, please, that'd be helpful.
So just to, I'll do my best to answer Councillor Owen's question. I've made a note of each and every one of them. The staffing one, it's not a new director, it's the head of asset management, and that post is funded through HRA and capital, so there's no impact on general fund. In terms of the ARC financing costs, that there's no impact, no income figures have been built into the budget, so there's no impact on those numbers. In terms of the council tax piece, again, that's for discussion. There was, again, for information, Warwick District Council last year were very brave in terms of pushing up their council tax to fund climate change measures. So that's something that happened nationally. I'm just trying to read my handwriting. And in terms of your point around the sale of the Crem land. The way we could gain a revenue benefit of that would be we would use the receipt from the land to fund capital, and then we'd use the revenue from the Crem to share out as a dividend. So it'd be a revenue capital swap, which is legitimate. So rather than using revenue to fund capital for the Crem, we'd use the capital from the land and use a revenue for a dividend. Happily draw your diagram or share that with you again on a one-to-one. It's a revenue capital swap, which is legitimate. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I bring in Councillor Radulovic and then Councillor Barbara Carr, please?
Chair, just to say that, again, it's on the medium-term financial strategy, it's based upon the current situation, and we are in a very difficult and potentially lockdown situation. All options are on the table. They will be discussed. They will be brought before the relevant committee, and people will have the chance to make all their input. As for car parking charges, it's been the policy of this council to have the free hour, and to echo your sentiments, Chair, they'll never get that one by me to charge for the first hour, you know, so you can forget that one. But overall, Chair, it is with a guarded warning that the medium-term financial strategy is based upon the current situation and is likely to change in the coming weeks and months ahead, particularly with a potential for a increase in measures to level 2 and restricted movements, and that will impact undoubtedly on this council's finances. So it comes with really a public health warning that these figures and this strategy is based upon the knowledge and information that we have from the year so far, and is likely to change in the coming months.
Thank you very much, Councillor Radulovic. Councillor Barbara Carr.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to really just say a few words. Councillor Owens particularly said, and I quote, instead of saving money, we seem to be spending it. Well, we are. We're not on the scale that his government is spending it. We're not only spending it, but wasting it. I'll give you a few figures, shall I? £252 million spent on masks with the wrong type of fastenings. £16 million on faulty antibody tests from China. £790 million on useless tests from Roche and Abbott, that's a company. £7.5 billion on PPE that was not usable, and £11.8 billion on a bungled tracing app. Now, if some of that small amount of money and be given to local councils, who are then able to use that money to work for the good of the people locally on this pandemic, it would have been a much better use of money. So I don't know how he dares say that we shouldn't spend money, we should be saving it, when his government are just throwing it down the drain. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. I've got Councillor Paul Simpson and Councillor Roberts Thompson, and then I think I'm going to try and move to the vote then.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard the debate, I think that Mr. Dawes' statement that we face challenging decisions is somewhat of an understatement on this occasion. And certainly I fear that some redundancies may be in the pipeline. I was in a similar position some 4 years ago, and where we did make some people unfortunately compulsory redundant. I think it was about 7 or 8 we finished up making from the cash officers. Can I ask, are compulsory redundancies, if necessary, on the cards, or are you running a policy where you will only go for people who... Can you just clear up what the current position is, please? Thank you.
There are no, the current position is that there are no compulsory redundancies earmarked in this authority, even under the challenging times that we are facing. The cash office system, as you're well aware, of course, was a debacle and led to this authority losing money. And we're not going to be in a position where we'll be making kind of reckless decisions when it comes to the employment of our staff. That said, there are challenging times. We're fully cognizant of those, and I think it would be premature and wrong to make statements specifically around that in these uncertain times. But rest assured, there are no compulsory redundancies at all being talked about at Broxtowe Authority. Councillor Councillor Roberts-Thompson, then Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Can I accept that these are just proposals, and that yes, we're in an exceedingly difficult position. Again, on page 54, I'd really just like to say that I'll be really interested to see what comes out of the one on homelessness, the reducing the costs of bed and breakfast. It's only a small amount of money. It makes a huge difference to the people involved, but it would. If Mr. Dyer can come up with a solution to these sorts of intractable social problems, it would be really great, because it does cost money. It costs a lot of money to house people who are otherwise homeless, and we have a responsibility there. But if we can use our own services or our own empty properties there, that would be well and good. And I would be delighted to see some movement there and see what comes up. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to take Councillor Carr and then finish with Councillor Radulovic, and then I promise I'm going to move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. We have to remember, of course, that whilst this administration, as the likes of the Labour, Liberal Democrat and Independents actually took over in May 1919, we didn't actually set our own budget until March 2020, because as the timings go, for the first year of a new administration, they have to go with the budget from the previous administration. So this is our first budget, which came into effect on the 1st of April 2020, when we were in the middle of the peak of the first wave of the COVID pandemic. And everything has gone downhill rapidly since then. So a little bit of understanding from some members of the opposition as to regards to that situation wouldn't go amiss. Of course, it would have been helped even more if the previous administration hadn't done like virtually every other council in the country, bar about 6, and actually took the opportunity to increase council tax in line with inflation instead of freezing it, which has made a huge difference to ongoing income. And some of the figures that you see before you tonight are as much to do with the Conservative last administration as well as COVID-19. Of course, we talk about the limit to what we can raise for council tax. Of course, the county council can raise a bit more specifically for social social services reasons. It would be a good idea of the government to actually look at this and say local government is in a mess financially because of the pandemic. For the next 3 or 4 years, we will allow them to increase council tax by 5% per annum instead of 2%, and that would negate a lot of the problems that all local authorities, whether the Conservative, Liberal Democrat, Labour or coalition authorities. With regards to car parking, all options are open as far as I'm concerned. And you know, I can hear Trish, and I understand what Trish is saying, but really we need, you know, we can only look over the border at Erewash, which is as I understand it, run by the Conservatives, very level-headed bunch of Conservatives, I have to say, and they don't have free car parking charges in the towns. So, you know, what's right for them over in Erewash clearly isn't the same here in Broxtowe. And I would also like to put Councillor Roberts-Thompson's mind at ease over the homelessness. What's being suggested there is that we have our own premises for the homelessness. instead of putting them into very expensive bed and breakfast accommodation. That's the difference. The intention isn't to give the homelessness an even badder lot than they've already got. It's to actually make it better and potentially house them permanently, rather than keep tossing them from pillar to post in very expensive accommodation, i.e. bed and breakfast. So you can be assured, Trish, that that isn't our intention at all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Radulovic, I'm going to finish with you, please, if you can just summarise briefly.
I'll be very brief. Just to say that when you look at the medium-term financial strategy, and yes, we are in challenging times, this council is in a far better situation than the majority of councils in the country. Certainly far better situation than almost any other council in Nottinghamshire, especially the county council with their financial problems that run into tens of millions of pounds, and Nottingham City, of course. So with the prudent and responsible financial management that this council's shown, and the care that it's shown to its electorate and people that live here, we've done a remarkably good job under very difficult circumstances. And I thank, again, Mr. Dar and all his team for all the work they've done. But just if I can, Chair, close on the homelessness situation. You will remember, of course, at Christmas Council had announced that nobody in Broxtowe would be sleeping rough, and that was supported, I'm glad to say, by all members of the council. That initiative's been carried on even to this day. We have officers proactively working within the community to ensure that nobody sleeps rough on the streets of Broxtowe. Now, if we want a discussion around the homelessness legislation and the failures of that, I'm more than happy to do that with Trish Roberts-Thompson or anybody from the Conservative group on a stage in front of the public. You know, the legislation has so many holes in it, it actually makes the situation in many circumstances worse than it should be. But Chair, we have nobody who is intentionally sleeping rough on the streets of Broxtowe that we leave there. Chair, they are dealt with in a caring and compassionate manner and will continue to be doing so. It's our responsibility as a responsible council and as a good set of human beings to do the best that we can, and we will. But it's about the reduction in homelessness costs that go into bed and breakfast, and actually locating people as far south as Leicester or as far north as Sheffield, because there isn't suitable accommodation in the locality. That's, Chair, is madness. It has to stop. And so we are taking a responsible attitude in ensuring that minimum number of people are in bed and breakfast and are moved into permanent accommodation instead.
Thank you very much, Councillor Radulovic. That's going to conclude this item then. I'm going to move to the vote on the recommendations at the bottom of page 45. They've been moved and seconded to approve the medium-term financial strategy and the business strategy. Jeremy, can you take us through that vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
Abstain.
Councillor Eason.
Abstain.
Councillor Kerry.
Abstain.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
Abstain.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts-Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Simpson.
Abstain.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
That's carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. Agenda item 8, the budget timetable and budget consultation for 21-22, set out on pages 57 to 68, outlines our annualised engagement process with communities across Broxtowe, the importance of engaging as best we can with communities to try and get them to buy into how, as an authority, we spend allocations and resources. The recommendation at the bottom of page 57 is that the process be approved and the questionnaire be approved. I'm going to move that formally from the chair.
I'll second that.
And thank you very much, Councillor Carr. And then I'm going to open that to discussion. Mr. Dar, who's taken us through this? Is it
that I can help the committee? What you said.
I mean, we don't need a huge discussion, I suspect, because it's a familiar process to to people?
It's a very similar question I had last year. We had a further question around COVID. Otherwise, it's very similar to previous years. Thank you.
Excellent. But I see a couple of speakers. Councillor Philip Owen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to make any real comment on the budget consultation process. It's a legal requirement. It's long past its sell-by date, but there we are, because people simply do not respond to it. But on page 65, question 17, which of the following areas do you live in? I note that there's no reference to Strelly. Now, Strelly is not just Strelly Village. There is an estate of approximately 200 properties at the side of Bilborough College, but I feel certain that the residents of Strelly Village may well want to comment on the effectiveness of Broxtowe Borough Council.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Can we fix that, please, to make sure that there's adequate opportunity for that area to be included as well before this goes out, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Roberts-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, basically, this, as Councillor Owen has said, this is an obligation, but it's so general that I'm a bit worried that its results can be taken to mean anything. I wondered whether, in fact, seeing that we have to do it, it would be better to put some COVID questions in. For example, question 11 on page 63, how satisfied are you with the way you can access council services? I mean, do you answer it in relation to COVID, in relation to now, or in relation to, past March this year? It's some of these questions, when you look through, are very confusing now that we have such a totally different circumstances arising from COVID.
At the top, Councillor Roberts-Thompson, can I just interject there? At the top of page 63, question number 6, there's a specific question around that issue with a free text box associated with it for people to
yes, I know, but some of the other questions, you could, how do you answer them? Do you answer them right now, COVID or pre-COVID? It's, that's
and I guess we expect our respondees to contextualise that for themselves, and that'll be a task for officers and committees to draw out those responses. Yeah,
it would also help if you had good design, of consultation design. My only other comment on page 65, question 18, I understand the accepted response is male, female, other, or prefer not to say. It's not another way. I think, but I'll leave that up to those who send it out. But yeah, thank you.
I try and pride myself on my gender characteristics, and I'll ask the team to confirm the best and most current and appropriate language in that sense. Thanks for that.
Okay, fine.
With that then, the recommendation at the bottom of page 57 has been moved and seconded. Can I ask that Mr. Ward take us through that vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
4.
Councillor Eason.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Radulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts-Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. We move on to item 9, which is grants to voluntary and community organisations, set out on pages 69 to 74. There's a recommendation at the bottom of page 69 to resolve those recommendations. Can I move that from the chair, please?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. And there's a couple of main ones and then a delegated responsibility grant application. The first one, Totem Coronation Hall Community Association, grant aid that we've paid in the past to cover their rent of the Coronation Hall, and specifically on Eastwood Town Football Club, Eastwood Athletic, sorry, Football Club, provision to upgrade the changing room facilities for women and girls, females at that club. So that's been moved and seconded. I'm looking on the chat and can't see anybody specifically coming in on that item. Anybody want to make a contribution, or can I move straight to the vote? Thank you. I'm going to take that as an indication.
No,
Councillor Kerry. Yep, just seen you, Councillor Kerry.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about Phoenix and Inham Nook.
We're not on that yet, Councillor Kerry. Oh. That's next item.
Okay, thank you.
But I'll bear you in mind, of course. Yep. You'll get first chance there.
Thank you.
So we'll move to the vote on item 9, please. That's been moved and seconded, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cobley.
4.
Councillor Easom.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Philip Owen.
4.
Councillor Radzilovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
Carried, Chair. Thank
you very much, Mr. Ward. Item number 10 then is the capital grant request for Phoenix Inham Football Club, as set out on pages 75 to 78. There is a detailed submission on that, and there's a recommendation at the bottom of page 75. I'll move that from the chair.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you very much, and that allows us to discuss this item. Councillor Kerry, would you like to come in on this one?
Yeah, just that I did help Phoenix in their early days when they were starting up with some equipment and stuff from my county council divisional fund. I think it's a great club. There's a lot of really good people who are involved. They've got a lot of players, and it really is good to see Inham Nook get a team like that up and running. So I do support this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. I'm particularly interested in this application, particularly in the light of and you'll have seen at Policy Committee the upsetting child poverty figures for Broxtowe and the significant increase across Chilwell West as an area within Broxtowe, now outstripping parts of Eastwood and other of the more long-standing areas of child poverty. So this is a fantastic opportunity to support Phoenix Inham, who not only provide a wonderful club opportunity and participatory sport, which I've always been a supporter of, but I know the excellent volunteer network that they have and the people who run that, offering mentoring and other avenues to those who need help in terms of employment. And the model here on the committee tonight is one to extend that beyond just what one might think a traditional football club is, and that is to extend it to coffee mornings for elderly residents during the week. It's to have the potential for some food bank provision, for clothes bank provision, and organised community groups involving not just those wanting to play football, but a whole range of activities. And it's a fantastic opportunity. We're working up the lease agreements now with them as an organisation, and therefore allowing for investment in one of Broxtowe's assets as well. With that, I'm from the chair fully supportive as well, but I can see that there is Councillor Simpson and Councillor Easom also wishing to speak. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. If you could just indulge me and confirm, are we talking when we come to the vote of going to 50% of the total, or what exactly is it in monetary terms that you're going to be proposing? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the 50% basis isn't a rule, and it's predicated on some of the fundraising that Phoenix Inham and sourcing of local volunteers to help do the works as well, that they've done. So it's up to a maximum of £9,000, but it isn't. But it is also predicated on some of the fundraising that Phoenix Inham may be doing themselves.
Yeah, so what is it that you're actually going to be proposing?
So the proposal is up to is for a full £9,000, but it might up to a full £9,000, but it might not be £9,000.
So okay. So the proposal then is for up to £9,000, which is up to a 100% funding.
Correct.
Thank you. I understand.
Yeah. Councillor Easom.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I 100% support this. I think football clubs, especially in these tough times, are doing a fantastic job. I note from this that we're saying we're giving a 10-year lease. I know in other areas we've managed to give football teams a 25-year lease. If we give them a 25-year lease, if we can arrange that, then obviously they can then tap into the FA and the money from the funding from the FA. And the money from the funding of the FA is staged, but it gives them a lot of money. I mean, I think the first tier is something like £80,000. They will help them build all sorts of things. So if we could perhaps, I don't know how we quite do that, you're much more intelligent on these things than me, Chairman, but if we could perhaps work that we also take it back and we see, unless there's a particular reason that they don't want 25 years, if we could get this to 25 years, because I think we know from other areas, it gives them a massive leg up. And I'm 100% behind you, the money coming from Broxtowe. Absolutely, I am. But the reality is the FA have probably got a damn sight more money than we have. And if they could tap into that as well, that's got to be brilliant.
Thanks. Thanks, Councillor Eason. That's helpful. What I'll do, that's really helpful. I'll go back to the club themselves and to Mr. Crawford and Mr. Summers and look at the best model or the best vehicle for that. But I can see Councillor Radulovic is indicating to speak, and then I'll bring Councillor Kerry back in again.
Chair, the lease that they asked for was for 10 years, and that is to ensure that the clubhouse and facilities that are already there can be re-established, they can be refurbished and used. It was actually the football club's request for a 10-year lease, not ours. They can access FA funding for things like goalposts and supplies and things which we do in conjunction with those. But essentially, the facilities are already on site. This is to upgrade the facilities that are already there. And that's why they wanted a 10-year lease for security of tenure.
Thanks, Councillor Radulovic. Councillor Kerry.
Yes, thanks for letting me speak here. I totally agree with Councillor Easom. In any business, any charity, any extension to the security of tenure is a good thing, and I think that is a very positive suggestion from Councillor Easom, and I will be fully supportive of that. And indeed, may well be in a position to assist in some funding also for Phoenix Inham again in terms of my county council division fund, as they're in my division. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Carr.
Yeah, just to back up what the leader said, Councillor Dudovic, that they've specifically asked for a 10-year lease. We have to remember they've got the pavilion there already, so there's no new build, and they also play on the park, I understand. So what they would actually do with £80,000, I don't know. So I think we at this stage need to pass this tonight on the basis that it is before us, in that this is what we've been asked by Phoenix Inham to provide them.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the recommendation before us is the financial approval. I'll revisit, and we'll, in discussion with the club, we'll look at the best mechanism for length of lease, what works for the club, what works for the authority as well. But that was a helpful debate on that issue. So thank you all. Shane, go on then. But I feel that we're in agreement, Shane. Councillor Easom, are you coming back?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we are. I'm sure we are in agreement. But my point is that our officers know about the 25-year least, and they know that it helps with the FA. So my point is, they may have asked for 10 years. I'm not making any aspersions. They may not they're not maybe professionals in aiding grants. So I feel that we as a council are there to give them the best possible advice. And I think the best possible advice in this situation is the 25 years. But you know,
I get the gist. That's helpful. Thank you, Councillor Easom. With that, then I'm going to move to the vote on the recommendation at the bottom of page 75, which has been moved and seconded. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cubley.
4.
Councillor Easom.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Radzilovich.
4.
Councillor Roberts-Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And
Don't forget to mute yourself, comrades.
Councillor Hallam.
4.
Thank you. That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. Item 11 is our regular performance management review set out on pages 79 to 84. It is a noting report. I'll move that from the chair.
I'll second that and apologise for the cat trouble we're having here.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Good job your camera was off. It boggles the mind what might be going on. We're trying to do something slightly different here. This isn't a full reflection of all the performance indicators or all of the key tasks and priorities within the department, but you recall a couple of meetings ago we've had discussions about trying to slimline this item to draw our attention perhaps in a more of an exception reporting way. I'm not convinced it's perfect yet, on the basis that I don't think it highlights necessarily all the good work and progress that is being made, because it gives the impression that things are only warning or off track, and that certainly isn't the case. But the report before you tonight is drawing those out at an exceptional level. So if you could bear that in mind when you're making your contributions, that would be most helpful. Mr. Dar, are you taking us through this one?
Yeah, I think what we usually do, Chair, is we tend to move straight to the data and just open it for members' questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you.
I'll go through it page by page then, if that's okay with members. Shout out if you have an issue or something you want to raise. Page 79, page 80, page 81, page 82, page 83, and page 84. Well, maybe we are getting something right then in the way that we're presenting the information. But I would like us to continually. I will be reviewing this again with members of the team in the future. But on the basis that we've been through the report, there was nothing raised. I'm going to ask everyone that it is only a noting report, that we note that report. Duly noted. Thank you.
Noted.
Thank you. I move then to item 12, which is the work programme set out on page 85, which is busy. The recommendation at the bottom of page 85 asks us to vote and resolve that. Mr. Dar would like to just come in on this.
I think, Chair, it would be good to add an exempt item to that particular meeting related to Liberty Leisure's financial performance in 2021, with a view to how the council can help the company during 2020-21, and that'll be a report drafted predominantly by the company, and I'll review that report, and then we'll put together a recovery plan and a strategy for managing what will be a deficit. So I think it's an exempt report because of the commercial information in the report. Thank you.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Dar. So on the basis that we include an additional report on the performance of Liberty Leisure, did you say to the 10th of December meeting? Can't hear you, Mr. Dar. Still can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank
Yep.
you.
10th. Oh.
Sorry.
With that, then I'll move formally the recommendation at the bottom of page 85.
Second that, Chair.
And sorry, I didn't ask for observations, but I will very, very quickly. Any comments or observations? Mr. Ward, can you take us through the vote then, please?
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Barbara Carr.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cobley.
4.
Councillor Eason.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Owen.
4.
Councillor Rajulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's carried. I wonder if we could just. Oh no, sorry, we have our votes next on the.
We do, yeah. So that is all the public business on the agenda. Item 13 is the exclusion of public and press, whereas a committee we're asked to resolve that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds they may involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1, 2 and 3, schedule 12A of the Act. So that has been moved.
I'll second that, Chair.
And that's been seconded, please. Can you just take us through that vote, please, Jeremy?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bagshaw.
4.
Councillor Carr, Barbara Carr, that is.
4.
Councillor Steve Carr.
4.
Councillor Cobley.
4.
Councillor Eason.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Pat Lally.
4.
Councillor Marshall.
4.
Councillor Philip Owen.
4.
Councillor Rajulovic.
4.
Councillor Roberts Thompson.
4.
Councillor Simpson.
4.
And Councillor Hallam.
4.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wonder if we could just wait until we hear that the stream has ceased, and then we can move on with the business.